here's the main difference between film music and classical music is that in classical music there is no other element that guides the form. The form is only the music, so you have to do everything you can to keep the listener engaged or captivated, right?
Hi, this is Sergey, and it's been a while. So while I'm in LA and doing my graduate degree, I'm surrounded by insanely exciting people who have lots to share, have a lot of stories and expertise in their field, which is usually the field of music, but also other fields of art. And I thought it would be a great idea to record and archive and share some of the conversations we've been having. And these conversations are sometimes super intriguing and insightful. And so the following is a conversation with a really good friend and a terrific composer of film music and of concert classical music, Carlos Durán. And we've had a really eye-opening conversation, and I hope you really enjoy. And there should be more of these coming, so please stay tuned.
Great.
All right.
Amazing. So, are we recording already?
Yeah, I think so. So,
Great.
So let's just start talking about and shooting shit.
Amazing.
So how have you been, and what have you been working on this summer?
And this summer, well, I just recently got a job offer at Leading Fingers Music. So
Congrats.
that's what I've been up to over the summer. It's a great job opportunity. I'm working as a composer assistant, not writing anything just yet, but really understanding how things in the film industry and film scoring work, and especially in that that environment, because it's a very specific environment of a collective of composers that are working for several projects at the same time. So, yeah.
And so it's mostly TV and
It's mostly TV documentaries,
right.
But they do pretty much all the BBC documentaries are done by them. And you will see almost the big projects are technically scored by Hans Zimmer, and it's always Hans Zimmer,
right.
and the composers and another type of composers that are from the Living Fingers. So that's how it works. So that's pretty much it, how it works. And I'm getting a lot of experience and how to be more efficient, how to stay focused and just produce a lot of music. See how much music is being produced there. So it's a whole thing.
So in our previous conversation, you said that it's about 12 music per week.
12 minutes of music would be kind of a safe, a safe ballpark of how much music you have to write as a composer under the the Leading Fingers umbrella, which is insane. I remember that I grew up on this notion of writing 2 minutes of music per day is
plenty usually.
It's plenty, exactly, and that's what you need, or what you needed in order to succeed and in order to have your chops up, your composing skill. But these guys go above and beyond. They go to the next level. They're delivering around 4 minutes of music per day sometimes. And it's an average. It really depends on the type of music that you're writing, because sometimes the music that you write is less complex in that maybe it has a little bit more sound design, and it's more pads and atmospheric, and evolves with time. So time is your ally there, so you can write easily 6 minutes of music. But when things are very specific and there's a lot of detail, if the orchestration or the style of scoring is very much John Williams, or in a very orchestral style, or an animation for Pixar or something like that, that's gonna take quite a long time just to create. I mean, just 1 minute of music. That takes a long time to produce. Oh, because they also are music producers. They're not only composers. They're music producers, and everything that comes out of their studios, it's fully produced music. That means that they have to take care of the mix, the master, everything. And unless it's a very big project in which they will outsource and like they will work with a specific, score mixer or something like that. But for smaller projects, they will have to do everything on their own.
So let's say it's a mid-sized project, so something that doesn't really require a full-scale orchestra and choir. So do they invite instrument performers to record at the studio as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, most of the composers at Bleeding Fingers are also performers. So what usually happens is that they will be actually writing for themselves a lot of the time. And yeah, like that's kind of like the idea with the project. Also, if they need a violinist, for example, and there's a violinist working, I don't know, like just across the room, across the hall in the other studio, they will try to do that, and they just try to help each other as much as they can, because there's usually not much time to work under those circumstances.
You being a guitarist, have you been asked thus far to?
Not yet, because the place is filled with amazing guitarists as well. So I think I'm like trying to let them know. I'm trying to be known as the classical guitarist, which is something that is not really common for scoring. Like classical guitar per se, that style is like very, very specific. But there are amazing guitar players, like electric guitar players, metal electric guitar players, you name it. There's a lot of things. Also like pop, like acoustic folk. There's a lot of. I don't know why, but I feel like there's mostly guitar players in the place. And aside from like some pianists and cellists also.
Right, but they don't have a dedicated space for actual, let's say, orchestra recording or
not in the studio, but when they have a let's say a big project, I think they do that. Like they as I said before, they outsource that. So they hire an orchestra but only if the project allows it. It's basically if the budget allows it.
Sure.
So yeah, which is the reality of like film scoring. You do the best with what you can. That's the idea of film scoring these days, I think.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is with the a couple of years ago with the Mandalorian soundtrack, Ludwig Göransson, he recorded his own like bass recorder.
Oh yeah, they had like a lot of flutes.
Yeah, and
a lot of recordings.
Yeah, and just seeing like behind the scenes documentaries on how the soundtrack was made. He records a lot of stuff just in his own studio, playing the toms or what have you. And when producing stuff for Childish Gambino, he recorded his own bass, glockenspiel, even having stuff like that, I feel helps immensely. Once I had this kind of an instrument. I wanted to use a harp of sorts in a score for a little short animated film that I did, but then I thought, well, why use a software instrument like a virtual instrument when it's actually possible to record, like to plug the strings of the piano and record that instead. So it definitely takes plenty of time compared to just doing that all in the box with the software instruments, but it definitely just elevates the whole production quality quite a bit.
I would have to say that it's always a trade-off. It's always a trade-off because when you're recording your own instruments, you really need to know what you're doing in terms of the process. if you need some compression, if you need like EQing, if you need everything to make it work and sound as best as it can. Which also has been the reason why a lot of people just like to record themselves, is because that sound, even if they're not good players, in the case of Göransson, like, no, he admits it, right? He admits it, that he's like maybe not the greatest recorder player in the world, but that's the idea, because there are certain nuances, there are certain mistakes, there are certain sounds that he wants to capture, and that is the essence. So it's no longer a question of being the most virtuoso player anymore. It's actually, what are you going to do with the sounds that you have at your disposal, right? So going back to what I was going to say with the trade-off is that sometimes what you have guaranteed with these sample libraries is that, or these virtual instruments, is that everything is already recorded, everything is packed and processed, and it's like, you know, it's really good quality, aside from, you know, some sample libraries. I mean, I don't know, like, but they record from, they're recording these great studios with great engineers, like that is already work that has been done for you. The only caveat is that they, you know those sounds and people use them, right? So it's like it's not very characteristic or very original sounding in that sense. So, which is why, like, you have this trade-off. If you want, and we faced it like that, like, I faced it like every day. It's like, okay, so what do we do? Like, you know, just like do strings. No, just pull up cinematic strings, man. Because like that's the best string library there is. And like,
or Berlin.
Right, exactly. But just do that, because it's actually gonna be easier to do the job. And sometimes that's what you have. Like, you only have a couple of hours to create something from scratch, right? And you can't really rely on like, oh, I wish. Of course, everybody wants an orchestra and everybody needs an orchestra, but this is the world we're living in. The turnouts are insanely fast. You know, producers can call you and say, or a producer or a film director would say, hey, can I hear this demo for tomorrow? And like, you know, it's I don't know, it's 7:30 p.m. right? So like tomorrow will be, you know, can you send something like tomorrow morning 6 a.m.? So that means that you already have to spend the night doing that. But where in the world are you gonna find a string section at that time that is available? It's not possible. So that's the idea, like, behind those demos. That's right, and like those virtual instruments. But yeah, it's like a combination. I think that the finding the right balance between the two is really important, and trying to maintain your originality in this, like, inside this already packaged sound world, because we're getting used to hearing the same sample libraries, the same the same sounds in every single project. And actually you can hear that there's people that are really good, that have really good ears to spot, like, oh, that's East West, that's that's that patch from Olafur Arnalds. You know, like they already know, just because they do it every day, right?
Yeah, and not just in film music, but also sometimes in pop music, they would use, even with people like Billie Eilish and her brother, producer, Phineas, yeah. So sometimes in her songs you would just hear the keyscape piano.
Oh, absolutely, and it's a standard. It's a standard. Everybody uses it, like, you know.
And somehow, you know, they have all of the resources they would need to record like the best, perfectly tuned Steinway piano. They go for like those somewhat plasticky sounding.
Yeah,
samples,
I mean,
which is a kind of a staple of the genre.
That's true.
And it works.
That's true. That's true. So I see that when you need, like, as a producer, I think that we both of us come from a very specific side of like the music industry, if that can be called still industry, which is the classical music world.
Right.
And the classical music world has a very specific way of doing things. So we're very basically trained to repeat that. But when we open up like our perspectives to how like many different types of music work, you're like, oh, like wait a minute, yes, like probably that's not the best technique in the world to play the, I don't know, saxophone or like brass instrument. But I don't know, like where I'm from, in Colombia, like, for example, brass instruments, the way you play salsa, they have to be a bad technique. That is a bad technique for classical players. So you would be back in the day. I remember like my parents are musicians and my dad studied trombone, and he would say that there was this. He will always get into fights because it was this eternal struggle between, okay, I need to learn the music that is being played right now. That is like what the market, like, you know, like what is commercial, what is like available for people, what the people are demanding, and that is this technique. But in the eyes of the Western classical canon, it's like, oh, that's sacrilegious, like whatever. Like they would denigrate this type of music or like the type of style, and they wouldn't call it a technique. They would say that's not it, not like that's not having a technique, right?
Right. That's incorrect. And
That's
there's
like
only one correct
exactly
way to play this instrument.
So the dogmatic way of approaching instrument, like I think that it really hurts, especially for us as composers and producers. Like it hurts the way you see music, and you can open opportunities, right? So if you can learn from, I don't know, EDM music, right? So if you could learn from the music that you're probably not that used to, and having a more open the more open perspective, and like be a little more open to what that music is. I think that, I don't know, that puts you in an advantage over a lot of people who are like still thinking about what is the right way of doing things.
For sure. Have you come across any I don't know, surprising or rewarding
New
pieces of
music?
Yeah,
Absolutely, I have.
That influenced you in some way, or
Actually wrote them down because it's been a while since I've listened to them, and I've been like collecting different types of music during this year. So a couple of months ago, I actually, and my friend Andreas, introduced me to this band, Fernandez 4. It's an Argentinian band, but they do jazz pretty much. But the song is called Hack or Shack, and it's a song that pretty much sounds like Radiohead, but it has an incredibly weird time signature, which is and that's the other thing. It's like not weird to it's not very like, you know, like thinky, you have to think about it, like mathematical. No, it just works. You can headbang to that.
right.
And it's groovy, like, so it's like there's groove to it. Amazing song. So Fernandez 4, the song is called Hack or Shack. Then there's another song, I would call it a song, by this, I forget where he's from, but I think it's like probably from like Finland or something like that. Ask Gel is a DJ, but he does like mostly ambient music. He has a really interesting song that keeps building. It's like, for me, it's like how can you do an eternal build-up, kind of like this, Forget the World, the concept.
Shepherd's
The
Song?
shepherd tone, yeah, something like the shepherd tone, but in a very like cool way, interesting sounds. And the song is called Autumn. So that's another one. And I recently, I'm plugging one of my friends here because he's an amazing concert music composer and contemporary music composer. My friend James Diaz. He did a piece recently called A Song For, and it's for violin and electronics. And it's insane. It's really good. There's so many new textures that you like, even in this music production kind of way, you would say, oof, I don't know if that would work. But the solely fact that exists makes you question, like, oh, maybe where can I use this sonority? He created the whole thing in it's just violin, and like the electronics are created. I think there are some samples in the violin, but the violin is like mostly extended techniques. There's a lot. He gets into microtonality. Very interesting stuff to listen to, and I think those are all. Like, there's another one that I keep thinking of that really changed like my perspective of like doing music, and is with this guy Johnny Greenwood. And Johnny Greenwood did an album.
Of Radiohead.
Yeah, of Radiohead. Yeah, but he's an amazing musician, producer, and film composer. And just let me look him up again, because I remember he released an album in 2015 called Junun, and that album features Shai Ben-Zur and the Rahashtan Express, which is like a band. I don't know if it's from Pakistan or from like India. It's a very interesting album, Junun, and he has the song that I discovered was Allah Elohim, and it's a very interesting song because the lyrics say that she starts. There's a female singer starting to sing in like, I think it's indie, and she sings about Allah and like the whole thing, and then like there's like Arabic thing influences. Like it's really like world music and how God is interpreted differently in different parts of the world, but everything is like combined, and for some reason that resonates a lot with me because the time signature and the style of the music is very similar to the Andean music of Latin America too. So it's like this insane combination of things that are like, oh my goodness, this guy is really like, I don't know, it hit me at a different level. And so, which is why I want to plug that in, because yeah, I really like that.
Speaking of like putting a lot of different influences in inside of one piece or one song, not too long ago I discovered a band called Pineapple Express.
Oh, Pineapple Express.
Have you heard?
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't really listened to their music.
I'm not sure where they're. I think they're from India as well,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, the film is very well known, but no relation to the film.
Okay.
And they combine so many different elements from, let's say, Indian music or Hindustani music. There's sometimes it sounds like funk, sometimes it sounds like rock, sometimes it has rap influences. So it has a bunch of different genres just colliding together into a kaleidoscope.
Nice.
It's so interesting to listen to. It's so captivating. And speaking about different sonorities that could work, I'm not sure which movie that could work for, but recently on Score Follower there was this piece by the Score Follower, a YouTube channel that showcases very kind of advanced new scores and pieces.
New music, yeah.
And if you could look it up, there's like a piece that's about basically Return to Monkey, where the guy just makes a lot of noises that are resembling apes.
No way.
Yeah, if you could just... Yeah, this one. So Darwin's Theory.
And it's of course notated.
Yeah, it's notated. It's super weird, but it's super interesting at the same time.
That's very interesting.
So one thing that I really wanted to touch on with you specifically is how we as composers who have more of a classical background rather than, let's say, EDM background or pop music background, we tend to want to overwrite things and to pack a lot of stuff into the music to make it very varied and complex and intriguing. But doesn't always, and in most cases, it doesn't really benefit the film, and it's kind of our ego getting in the way.
Okay.
Right? So you know what?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't say that it's only a problem that classical composers have. Of course, here's the main difference between film music and classical music is that in classical music there is no other element that guides the form. The form is only the music, so you have to do everything you can to keep the listener engaged or captivated, right? So it makes sense to do this kind of things, to have several things going at once, and maybe develop here, develop there, right? It's like you want to be as full as possible and hit the audience with much complexity as you can, but complexity not in the sense of like, oh, too complex, like not weird to understand, but rather as as much information you can give the audience to tell them that it's already like a universe that it exists on its own, so it's convincing and compelling. In the same way, a film worked. Like I think that a film worked in the same way. However, film uses other type of information in which music only it's like one portion, right? Like it is just one bit. So I think that you have to look, although you're a composer, you have to be the composer, right? Like you still have to make music and make good music and try to push that, like memorable tunes or whatever that is, or like music that is captivating and can encapsulate or can evoke the universe, like the sound universe of the film. Sometimes you have to also wear the hat of a filmmaker. You need to be a filmmaker, otherwise you're stepping on someone else's work. Exactly. Actually, yeah. Like so, the less you do, the better. And so a lot of people say that less is more. And in this case, yes, it works. You have to be aware of what information the film as a whole is trying to convey or like is putting out there. Sometimes, I don't know if you've seen this trend, but before, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the pace of the films were a little longer, right? There were more like silences and really weird silences. Now we took of it, like the edited has changed through the years, throughout the years. So before, yes, we have these moments where it's just visual information, and there's like this like really slow closing like up or like zooming in into, I don't know, a face or like a something, right? That doesn't happen that often anymore. And movies are now filled up with dialogue, and to a point where I actually don't like it that much. There are movies that are only dialogue, and there's a huge sin of doing that, which is like trying to explain the movie by like only saying, like doing exposition through dialogue, but you can actually show things in different ways, and you can show or communicate that information with the audience using all of those dimensions. You could communicate things with the audience using the music. You could communicate things to the audience using the photography or the lighting or the art direction, right? Like, or so a good film for me, it's still a good balance between all of those. So when you try to overwrite, then you are kind of like in your head and not in the head of a filmmaker trying to see everything at once. You just want to see your own music being played. And yeah, music is great, beautiful, but maybe not for that scene. And I don't know, but I think that you get used to the more you work with directors, because oftentimes I've gotten the reaction of like, oh, this music is great, it's beautiful, and they're like, the directors I've worked with, I'm being lucky because they're really polite and they won't say like, oh, this sucks or this doesn't work, but they would say, this is great, it's a great piece of music, but it's just not working for the scene. Can we change this? Can we like can we try one more time? And usually what happens is that I start loosening things off, right? So I start cutting off the strings, cutting off the certain instruments, or maybe stop the counterpoint. The music is already so dense and so counterpointy, and there's so much information there that it's not really letting the other aspects of the film shine, right? So you gotta keep your, I don't know if it's ego, I think it's more about have the sensitivity of a filmmaker and of course of a musician.
Or maybe what really helped me is, well, we're in UCLA and this class with Professor Peter Golub,
That's amazing.
who's an acclaimed composer himself, and he has a very specific approach with when teaching, and he shows a lot of scenes that work beautifully in music. And what I think helped me is that, even a couple of years ago when doing music, even for some, let's say, indie short film, I would think, well, this is, this piece of music really has to stand out and be super memorable, and I have to make it as good as I possibly can with all of the elements that I want to put in. But it would really go against what the film needed, and what really helped is switching my attention from just it being a standalone piece of music to it working as an element of the film, because film music at the end of the day is a trade, so it's a job that you do, so you have to do it as best as you can, but in the bigger structure of the film as a whole, and just, as a composer, taking a lot of pride in, well, this piece of music just fits the overall mood, and it's super striking, and it really highlights what the writer and the director put in, and the cinematographer put in. Even though it's a very simple piece of music, and there's not a lot of stuff going on, but if it fits, then it's the best job that you could have done. I think this kind of a shift of the mindset really helped me, and it's something that I used to struggle with a couple of years ago.
Absolutely, I think that I'll say it this way. I think it's that it's easier to take like loosening things off and like shaving things off than try to put something that's not there. So a lot of people, especially younger composers, and when we're starting, we tend to do that a lot. But I think that's a great problem to have. To just maybe I have to tone it down, and it's easier to tone it down than just okay, no, there's nothing here. I have to add more things. When that happens, that's the real problem, because I've definitely seen films or scenes that when you add the music and maybe it's not enough music, or what else is missing? There's something that it's missing, and you start wondering if it's your if you did a poor job, or maybe what is it, or maybe the pacing is still a little weird. Maybe, and that usually happens during a rough cut of films, which is quite normal, what you would do. But then hopefully you will get to locked picture and finally see something. Oh, that's okay. Maybe they cut down a little bit the pacing. They shortened the pacing so it feels a little faster. So now the music that I did, it doesn't feel that empty, right? Or maybe that is for a special effect. It's really about context, and you really have to read the room and read the scene and how the scene connects with the previous ones and what it's gonna go afterwards, to really know what you're doing and saying, okay, maybe it's enough. Maybe I can add more things to this. Maybe you can. But as I said before, it's easier to just do a lot of things, and then they say, oh no, we hate this. Okay, take it out. Cut it out.
Yeah, so that's exactly where the ego part comes in, because when let's say you wrote a lot of stuff, you put in a lot of ideas, and then they tell you to tone it down. Well, I already wrote that stuff. I love it. I kind of fell in love with with the work
Right.
that we've done as composers, and that's kind of the the
there you have to work on your attachment for the pieces that you write.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't know. I've been taught from the very beginning. I think it was like my first class with a composition teacher. His name is Gustavo Parra. He's like was my composition teacher back in Colombia, and my orchestration teacher, and great orchestrator. And he said one of the first things that he said was like, "Stop being in love with your music. You're gonna make changes. Constantly make changes, and you're never gonna get to that moment where you feel like it's like, okay, it's perfect. You only get, okay, I need to move on to the next thing, right? That's the only thing that you get, and yeah, trying to understand that for the longest time for me has been key. There have been many pieces that I like, yes, and they turn out to be something that I personally don't like, but that happens. Especially when you're doing film music, I think you get used to doing the best you can. And for me, I feel more rewarded not when I put a lot of work into a song or a track or a cue, and it's like, oh, it sounds so great, blah blah blah. I think I value more the fact that the director likes it and says like, this is perfect. I can tell you a story exactly about that. It's like one of the series that I worked in last year had a scene that was probably gonna get cut, gonna be modified. The whole pacing of it was gonna be, it was still, they were still deciding what to do. So I had to jump in, and I was like, okay, this is the time for me to actually try to do my best, as best as I can do to fit the scene. I believed that the scene had a great pacing. They were saying, no, this is too long, this is too, there was, how like showrunners sometimes are, and all the executive producers, and they say like, no, this feels too long. Well, turns out I did the music for that, and the showrunner liked it so much that they actually said like, oh, it's done. It doesn't need any editing. Because the music just, okay, no, this fits perfectly now. And that's what you can do with your music too. It's like, and for me, that's a big win. When you're like, yes, I was able to do not only a music piece, like a piece of music, I was able to do, film. I was able to be a filmmaker and do my job and try to complete something. You're helping the team because you're letting them know that they don't have to worry about that scene anymore. If that makes any sense. Like it's a trying to be a good team member in that sense.
That must have been so rewarding. Like,
yeah,
maybe the best compliments we can ever get as music creators and composers is, well, your music made the scene better. Like,
right.
Let's say the director wasn't sure of that particular scene and it wasn't quite working, but then just a simple line of music might have changed it for the better in the eyes of the director.
Yeah, absolutely, and elevated it in a way. I thought it was like, yes, for me it's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, and when thinking of film, really like the most wonderful, the most striking scenes are the ones where there's either very little or no dialogue, then there's interesting cinematography and something vital happening on the screen that is supported by music and sound. I feel like those are the most striking and memorable scenes from our favorite movies that we.
Did you watch Oppenheimer?
Yes, I did.
Oh my goodness. If I can jump in and say just something about that, because, touching on what you said, yes, like when dialogue is done, and there's things that you cannot express with words, then it's when all these like word different sides of different dimensions of the film take place, and they take over. And is the scene of the celebration, and I was not expecting to have the bomb there, because it's like it's a metaphorical bomb, but it hurt me so much. Spoiler alert! Sorry.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it was uncomfortable. It was like that moment. It was physically uncomfortable to a point that I started crying just because it was like so intense. It was really horrible. And then combined with of course I kind of knew that probably he was gonna see something weird happening, because you kind of the audience gets prepared into that scene with like the celebration. He starts losing his hearing basically, and like he so you know that something's weird is going on, and I knew that would reflect in the visual part, but I didn't know that it would reflect in the sound part as well, and it killed me. It was like, oh my goodness, yeah, stabbed me.
yeah, well, it was mesmerizing, and I was kind of expecting the sound of the bomb, because it didn't come right away, and I thought, well, Christopher Nolan and Goranson must be up to something. And after maybe a couple of seconds, I kind of let go and thought maybe they just wouldn't do the sound at all. And then it just floored me. Right.
But you're talking about the moment the bomb went off, right? Like that.
Right, and the celebration afterwards.
And the celebration. Because what I like about the celebration is that there's no bomb. Like there's like the sound of the bomb is not there. It's just the people. But it's so loud that it hits you like how a bomb would do. Exactly like that. You see the people reacting. It's like, oh, it went off, right? So you first see it, and then you hear it. And that was right there. I was like, wow, that's just sound design, but it was great.
So were you looking into like the 20 millimeter IMAX theaters to watch it?
Oh, the 75 millimeter thing?
75.
No, I was not able to go. I mean, when like the movie hadn't come out, and they were already sold out. Like it was insane. Here in Los Angeles, we're insane. It was insane. I went to a regular IMAX to see it.
Okay, well,
so
yeah.
If that helps.
Right. And I think we had a terrific conversation.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk more, and there's always a lot more to talk about. So maybe next time we could resume our conversation.
Absolutely.
That was just fun and enlightening in many ways, and I really enjoyed these conversations with you. So thank you for taking your time to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I like to talk a lot. If you, I don't know if you've realized. So for me, it's not a problem to talk about things, to talk film, to talk music. Something we didn't really cover is like, and we really won't. I would love to talk about it in the future. Is the fact that we are kind of a weird species right now, because we are interested in film music, but we also are concert music composers. So how do we manage to manage to put them together? Are there things in our brains, for example, that are different? That discussion I really would like to touch on.
Right. Because the approaches are different, and usually, so how do you usually write music? Do you write it behind the...
Oh, you want to talk about it now?
No, maybe some other time, because usually the approaches and the software is different for writing classical concert music. You would be writing it in Dorico or Sibelius.
Yeah, notation software.
Yeah, in the notation software, but you would be writing film music in the DAWs, in DAWs. So that's like kind of two different professions happening at the same time.
Right.
Um, and those are kind of different approaches because you're channeling different parts of your brain, probably. You know.
Absolutely. I think that it took me quite a while to feel comfortable with both.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing. I know that there are some composers that just lean on one thing to like basically focus all of their creative output into that one software, and they just do whatever accommodations they need, whether if it's for film or for concert. There's a lot of composers that use DAWs, but they're concert music composers, and they use it because if they have to do a film, they're already working on a DAW, right? So it's an easier way to do that. Yeah. So, but however, I think I feel comfortable. I'm starting to feel comfortable into like one or the other, and really it depends on what you need. You know what I mean? So, and that's part of the advantage of being here at UCLA, learning not only film music but like concert music, and still learning about concert music, is that training of staring at a screen or staring at a blank piece of paper. Even if you don't have a DAW or like a notation software, you can still write with a pencil and a piece of paper. That's just what it is. Like at the end of the day, it's about you putting your ideas down, and it doesn't matter which medium you're using. At the end of the day, it's about your creativity. Like, where do you put it? Do you record your things? Do you sing to your phone? Do you what's your method, right? And I think that being able to keep studying music or like classical music and being literate in using the actual like music notation is a great way of like keep writing and keep putting your ideas down. So yeah, for sure.
I do know one really interesting composer who is around the age of 45. He's classically trained and mostly a classical composer, but he also did music for multiple films that are fairly like high budget by Russian standards, because he happens to know multiple directors through. Like there is this virtuoso viola player, Yuri Bashmet, who has been performing pretty much all over the world. He's kind of his like younger friend, and he got to meet a lot of directors. But the really bizarre and peculiar thing is that he doesn't even use notation software. He just writes pencil to paper or pen to paper.
Pen to paper.
How he manages to do film music is kind of beyond me, because he has to be like looking at footage and recording something on his recording, playing something, or just writing something. It must be so hard to kind of get this whole thing to work, because he has to send stuff to people who will actually get it into a DAW to.
In order to get the demo, just to show it to the directors. It's like, that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work, for sure.
That's impressive. I think I think John Williams also works like that. The thing is, like, he's a.
Well, he is 150 years old, so that's. That's a cheap joke. I apologize. Well, in any case, he's 95 or 85.
No, I think he just turned 90 recently.
90. Okay.
90 something.
So 90. Yeah, but in his case in particular, it makes sense, right? But when younger people do that, that's kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that times have changed, and there is a reason why we moved to newer technologies, and there's a reason why we have to adapt to newer technologies. See all this hustle of this Russian composer to get to his demo, which is something that you can do in one day and just send it like that, right? So I guess that it also works, and not to say that there's one thing better than the other. I mean, that also works, but you just have to be way more organized. He has to be. I imagine that like times for him have to be. He needs to take it into consideration the time it takes the assistant that is helping him creating the demo, the mock-up, and he needs to take that into account. So for him, time is dilated. You know what I'm saying? So it's like in order to have like nice workflow or have like a nice pipeline of like how fast are you going to be turning out material. That's going to be definitely a big problem. Also, maybe he needs to get really good at reading exactly what the scene needs, right? Because a revision for him would mean an insane back and forth, right? It's like something that's really hard to go back, and like a rewrite would take ages, right? So give or take.
Yeah, his his situation is a little different. It's more of a, let's say, John Caroliano situation where he has a bigger name, and directors are more interested in working with him because he's either a friend or just a more well-known kind of guy, and they're allowing more time for him to just work on.
I mean, he has created his reputation, so like I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure.
second farewell here.
Second farewell.
So it's an honor, it's a pleasure to be here, to be talking about again film, music, and we'll see you in the next one.